When the war broke out in August 1914, no one could know what was coming.
Es war eine Hurra-Stimmung sondergleichen. In der Heimat, da gibt's ein Wiedersehen.
Each nation hoped to gain from the war. They had alliances to honor, old scores to settle.
All over the world, there are young fellows who say the war is just an adventure, and it's our country, and it's patriotism, and it's partly to get decorations. It's a mix. It's a mix, and it's wonderful because you get away from family and so on. You're all of a sudden on your own at 18 or 19 or 20, which is great.
The French had feared German aggression for years. Now they hoped the threat could be ended once and for all.
We really believed that the French army would perform miracles, that it would reach Berlin in 48 hours, no more than that.
48 heures à Berlin, rien ne nous étonnait.
We didn't think for one moment that the war would go on for so long, or that it would be so cruel.
Everywhere, people believed what their leaders told them, that they would be better off after the fighting, and that the soldiers would be back soon. In St. Petersburg, Russians were mobilized to fight for the Tsar. In Vienna, the soldiers of Austria-Hungary were ready to fight for the Habsburg Empire. At the start of the war, Britain was the only country that still relied on volunteers. But men flocked to the colours, fearing they'd miss a war that could be over by Christmas.
The atmosphere, it was certainly electric, but almost unbelievable.
That they would be better off after the fighting, and that the soldiers would be back soon. In St. Petersburg, Russians were mobilized to fight for the Tsar. In Vienna, the soldiers of Austria-Hungary were ready to fight for the Habsburg Empire. At the start of the war, Britain was the only country that still relied on volunteers. But men flocked to the colours, fearing they'd miss a war that could be over by Christmas.
The atmosphere, it was certainly electric, but almost unbelievable. We now were excited about it and all ready to join in because everything had been rather, too peaceful almost until that time. The country was overrun by volunteers in such numbers that I don't think the government could deal with them for a long time.
Mobilization plans that had taken years to prepare were implemented quickly. It was war by timetable. Special train schedules dispatched millions of men to the fronts, with all the industrial efficiency modern governments could command. As men were absorbed into the new mass armies, their individual dreams and personal ambitions were put aside. The war soon took on a world scale, as European countries turned to their overseas empires to raise even more troops. 300,000 men left from Australia alone. And to help Britain, more came from New Zealand, South Africa, and Canada.
In Australia at that time, we were part of the British Empire and were very loyal to Britain, and we felt it was our war. It's a bit different today, perhaps, but at that time, that was the feeling. Apart from which, if you stayed a year or two longer, you'd have got a white feather from the girls. No, it was a thing to do.
More than 100,000 Indians were hurriedly shipped over. On arrival in France, they were issued with woolen underwear. Chakunga came from a village on the Burmese border.
I wanted to take part in the British government's war. I wanted to see Western countries for myself. We were told there were healthy places.
The French imported contract workers from China to do heavy labor. They dealt with them briskly. More soldiers came from French colonies in Africa. And after 3 years, the war would bring in the world's strongest nation.
Your Uncle Sammy needs you one and all. Answer to his call. It's your country, it's mine.
4 million young Americans would be rapidly drafted when the United States ended its neutrality in 1917. Many were as keen to go as Albert Powys.
I liked America. I guess I was patriotic. Because every time I heard the band play a good marching song, I'd have cold chills run up and down my back.
A disproportionately high number of troops were black Americans. The government told all recruits they were entering the war to defend democracy.
I'd never heard of democracy before. I never knew what the hell I was fighting for. All I knew, I liked the uniform and I wanted to be in the army.
It's your country, it's my country, with millions of real fighting men.
With little idea of what they would have to face, troops leaving New York Harbor laughed off their fears with gallows humor.
In the distance, we saw Statue of Liberty. And we had a bunch of comics on the show, on the boat, you know, and one of them said, "Did you hear what that statue's saying to you?" And we said, "No." He's saying, "That's your ass, big boy, that's your ass." That means you're never coming back. You're gone.